Hi, I'm Mike Beliveau, and today we're back at the West Shore Sportsmen's Association, and we're going to be taking a look at another one of the iconic revolvers of the 20th century. Today's revolver is this little baby. It was originally known as the Smith Wesson Military Police for the first half of its career, until Smith & Wesson dropped their names and went to number designations, and then it became the number 10, or Model 10 I should say. Now, this gun was the main competitor to Colt's official police revolver. And it started off behind, but by the end, well really, by the three-quarter mark in the century, it had surpassed it by far and went on to become the most produced and probably the most popular double-action revolver in history to date. So let's take a look at Smith & Wesson's Military and Police. So the Model 10 is a solid frame, swing out cylinder revolver that features total ejection. Now, it can be loaded obviously one at a time, though the favored way to load it is with a speed loader, like this. Well, even though this is definitely an iconic revolver of the 20th century, it actually got its start in the 19th century, in 1899 to be exact, as the military and police model. For most of the 20th century, Smith & Wesson's military and police model, or number 10, competed head-to-head with Colt's official police. And when I grew up, in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, as a kid, if you saw a cop on the beat, it was almost a guarantee that he would have one of those two revolvers in his holster. Now, during the 20th century, Smith & Wesson manufactured over 6 million military and police, or new model number 10 revolvers, making it the most manufactured revolver in history. The government was dissatisfied with the performance of the .38 Long Colt cartridge, and they weren't that crazy about the model 1892 revolver that it was chambered for. And they went to Smith & Wesson and asked if they could come up with something better. And Smith & Wesson designed the first model of the military and police, which looks a little bit different than what we're used to. It has no forward locking point for the ejection rod. So it looked a lot like the Colt, you know, just a bare rod hanging out there. Now, Smith & Wesson didn't rest on its laurels with a gun chambered for the .38 Long Colt. It took the government at its word, and it began to develop what they thought would be a better cartridge. They extended the case of the .38 Long Colt by about 1/10 of an inch, and made what's now known as the .38 Special. And in the .38 Special, they were able to go from 18 grains of powder that the .38 Long Colt had held to 21 grains of black powder. And they upped the velocity by about 100 feet per second. Now, the reason they stuck with the .38 Long Colt case instead of using their own Smith & Wesson, .38 Smith & Wesson case and extending it, is because the government had a lot of .38 Colt ammunition, and it didn't want to just throw it in the dumpster. So it wanted to have a gun that would be able to be backwards compatible with the old ammunition and fire the new ammunition, which is a great boon for us because we ended up with the .38 Special as we know it today. Now, by 1902, Smith & Wesson was loading the .38 Special cartridge with smokeless powder, and basically the modern age of double-action handguns was born in 1902. Also in 1902, with the advent of smokeless powder .38 Special cartridges, Smith & Wesson revised the first model military and police revolver, and they issued the second model military and police revolver, and it had some significant changes from the first model. The most obvious change is the locking lug under the barrel to secure the end of the ejector rod. And that gives Smith & Wesson its signature look. You can grow that into a half shroud or a full shroud, but that didn't happen until they started competing with the Python. But whether it's just a lug or it's a full shroud, the silhouette of the barrel now looks distinctly Smith & Wesson and quite different from the Colt silhouette. Standard barrel lengths were 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches, and 6.5 inches. And by 1904, you could get the Military and Police with the standard square butt that it had always come with, or with a rounded butt to make it more amenable to concealed carry. In 1915, Smith & Wesson equipped the Military and Police with a hammer block safety, and they enlarged the sights. So a thicker front sight and a wider rear sight. And if you've ever used the original Smith & Wessons, the front sights are very hard to see, especially if your eyes are aging like mine. So this was a welcome improvement. During World War I, of course, Colt's 1911 semi-automatic pistol was the standard sidearm of the U.S. Army, but production could not keep up with the need. So the government commissioned the Model 1917 revolvers, which were big end frames Smith & Wessons or the Colt 1917, to fire 45 ACP with moon clips. But they also bought vast numbers of the Military and Police in .38, and a lot of those were used for behind-the-lines work, security guards, things of that nature. But Smith & Wesson had a very good war with the Military and Police. After the war, Smith & Wesson really was in heavy competition with Colt for the police market, and they made steady inroads over the next 70 years. In 1936, they introduced the first snub-nose revolvers built on the K-frame. And they were available in 2-inch, 2.5-inch, and 3-inch barrel lengths, generally with the round butt configuration. And this was a big step forward for Smith & Wesson because previous to this, all of their snub-nose revolvers were the top break action varieties chambered in .38 Smith & Wesson caliber. So this was a significant increase in power and in strength of design. During World War II, government purchased Smith & Wessons, of which there were a great deal, are usually identified with a V before the serial number, and they're known as the Victory model. Now the finish on Victory models is typically sandblasted and parkerized, so it's kind of a rough finish. Much cheaper and probably more durable than the fine polish and blue jobs that you would see on the commercial guns. Some of the other distinguishing features on the Victory model are a lanyard loop on the butt, bottom of the butt frame, and the stocks are usually going to be uncheckered walnut. So, total economy for the U.S. government. About 350,000 Victory models were purchased in .38 Special by the United States government. The Victory model was standard issue for aviators in the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps. They were also very heavily used by security guards at defense installations and defense contractors during the war. Also during World War II, almost 600,000 Smith & Wesson Victory models were provided to Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand under the Lend-Lease program. British Lend-Lease guns were chambered for the .38/200 cartridge, which is actually the .38 Smith & Wesson cartridge with a 200 grain bullet. Also during World War II, the Office of Strategic Services, which was the of course, predecessor agency to the CIA, issued thousands of military and police revolvers to resistance fighters in Europe. And at the close of World War II, the United States had many thousands of military and police revolvers in their arsenal. And those were given to the CIA to give to our allies for undercover work, for anti-communist insurgency work, and for just about any wet work that the CIA needed done. After World War II, the military and police went back to civilian dress and was a popular seller for Smith & Wesson, back with a commercial finish and a new type of stock, the Magna stocks, as opposed to the stocks that fitted very closely to the frame and just went up to that circle, that kind of half circle cut in the frame. And I think they're an improvement, though certainly not as good as the Target stocks that came along later. In 1957, Smith & Wesson did away with the model names that had served them so well since 1859. And they went with a soulless numbering system, which may be easy, but it kind of lacks panache. But at that point, the military and police model became the Model 10, and it's probably better known today as the Model 10 than as the military and police, because of course now we have the semi-automatic pistol military and police, and we wouldn't want to confuse those. So it's been known as the Model 10 since 1957. Now, since the beginning, the Model 10 or the military and police has been available in either blued finish or nickel finish. Mine is a nickel finish gun. It's incredibly attractive and durable, I have to say. Most of my guns are blued, but I don't think I would trade this one out for a blue gun. I really like it. Blue guns did predominate, though, in the 20th century, more than nickeled guns. In the late 1960s, the tapered barrel and the half-moon ramp front sight were replaced by the heavy bull barrel and by the no-snag ramp front sight. And that's probably the configuration that most people my age would remember, because that certainly became the most popular police configuration of the Model 10 during the 1960s, 1970s, and early 80s, which in a way were the heyday of the Model 10. At that point, they had really supplanted the official police, and Model 10 was the gun that you were going to see for most officers carrying. There were departments that allowed 57 Magnum guns, and there are a number of those. We'll probably talk about some of those in other parts of the series. And for the discriminating law enforcement officer who was required to use a .38 Special, there was the K38 Combat Masterpiece Model 15, which was an adjustable sighted version of the Model 10, and I think, for me, pretty close to my favorite version. So those were all available, and those were all what you would have seen in officers' holsters in the 1970s. So like I said, my Model 10 is a nickeled gun. It's got kind of a half-moon ramp front sight. It's got the tapered barrel. My Model 10 was made in 1962. And I kind of consider the Model 10 and other guns made on the K-frame to be the Goldilocks guns of all the double action revolvers. I mean, J-frames are fine. In fact, I carry a J-frame for pocket carry for a lot of the summer when, you know, you really can't have a lot of cover garments on or anything, and it's great for that. But it's only a 5-shot, and it is really teeny tiny. The big highway patrol, you know, Model 27, Model 28s, in 357 Magnum were built on the end frame, which is the same frame a 44 Magnum's built on. So those were big, heavy guns for shooting 38s through. But the K-frame is just right. It's a Goldilocks gun. It feels fantastic in your hand. It's just the right size for 38s, and it shoots like a dream. And it's no wonder that they were remarkably popular throughout the 20th century. They definitely are one of the best revolvers ever made. And luckily, since they made about 6 million of them, they're not that hard to find. You can get yourself one for a very reasonable price. You know, we don't much carry them today, obviously. I mean, if I want a gun that size, I carry my high power in 357 SIG. But for going out plinking at the range, man, there is nothing more fun than shooting one of these K-frames. So if you get a chance to pick up a Model 10, I say jump on it, and you won't be sorry you did. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you down the road. Until then, bye.